Hey, what's up everybody? Hammerheart Metal Reviews here once again. It is that time of the month, my favorite time, to recap my favorite albums from this past month, from April 2022. This was a pretty solid month, quite a few that I could have included on here. I think I'm going to list about 14 albums, so I didn't quite narrow it down to just the top 10 because there was a few extra ones that I wanted to talk about. I could have easily talked about like 20 albums here. It's been a pretty solid month overall, but these ones are the ones that really stood out amongst the crowd. I got a really good mix of genres here. We got like black metal, death metal, doom metal, folk metal, speed metal, traditional metal, a little bit of everything this month, so that's awesome. Been able to touch on quite a few genres. Actually, I don't think I have any power metal this month, so if there's any awesome power metal albums that came out that I'm not talking about, definitely let me know down below, because yeah, I'd like to hear some of that too. But anyways, yeah, I'll just get right into this. As usual, I will list all these albums down below in case I mispronounce any, because I am sure to do that. So I'll have those in the description down below, but if you want to see the ranked order, you will have to stay and watch the video. So let's kick this off. Coming in at number 14 is Armory with their album Mercurion. So this is some speed metal from Sweden. Maybe some similar bands would be like Enforcer or Evil Invaders. I don't think Armory are necessarily quite on the level of those two bands, but it's a very fun album. Maybe not quite as catchy as their counterparts there, but nonetheless, if you just want to listen to a fast, fun, aggressive album, this checks all those boxes. Pretty solid stuff. Definitely worth a listen if you're into speed metal at all and just feel like having a good time. Go check out Armory. Up next at number 13, I am going with Månegarm, and I will definitely mispronounce this album title, but it's Ynglingaättens. Like I said, definitely mispronouncing that, so I apologize. This is some folk metal, Viking metal with hints of black metal in there. Definitely a very typical album from the genre, maybe not too many surprises, but it's very well executed, very enjoyable. If you've heard Månegarm at all in the past, this is following in the footsteps of the previous albums, just exactly what you'd expect and exactly what you want from this kind of album. Super enjoyable stuff, and if you're into any sort of folk metal, I would strongly recommend at least going and giving it a listen. That's why it's in number 13. Up next at number 12, going with something completely different, a band called Jord and their album Måne. So this is some atmospheric black metal, but that's a very loose term here. There's very little black metal to be found here, very fringe black metal. This is more like black gaze, post-rock, whatever genre you want to call it. I hate too many genre tags here, but this is just very relaxing, easy listening music. Definitely, if you're into a band like Alcest, maybe like the lighter moments of progressive era Enslaved, like with the clean vocals. Like there's a good mix of clean vocals and still some harsh black metal vocals mixed in here, but the music itself is not too much in the black metal vein. It's a very soft approach, but it's very good to have in the background, just drift off to it. It's enjoyable in that sense. I don't know if this is an album I'm going to go back to a ton all the time, but if you're into something that you just want something to put on in the background that you don't really have to pay that close attention to, but that's still like beautiful and relaxing, but still has those couple of metal elements in there, it's definitely a good album in that sense and worth checking out. So go give Jord Måne a listen. Up next at number 11, I'm going with Watain and their new album, The Agony and Ecstacy of Watain. So, I mean, this is one of the most popular black metal bands around these days, so you know exactly what you're in store for here. There's not really any huge surprises, like maybe a couple curveballs and a couple songs here and there with some like female vocals and stuff like that. But all in all, pretty much exactly what you would expect from a Watain album. Very solid for like melodic black metal. It's not necessarily a standout even within their own discography. I think it's decent, definitely worth listening to if you're into the band at all. Didn't quite crack my top 10, but in at number 11 is pretty good. It's been a pretty solid month. Sticking on the theme of melodic black metal, the next band has some similarities to Watain sound for sure, and that is Vimur with their album Transcendental Violence. This one's in at number 10, and yeah, melodic black metal, much in the same vein as Watain or like Dissection. I believe these guys are from the States though, so that's a little bit different. Cover art's pretty cool. Just, yeah, a different kind of album. Tons of great riffs. If you're into any sort of melodic black metal, I would say go check this out. Probably not as well known of a band, but definitely an enjoyable album with a bunch of good riffs on there. So go give Vimur's new album a listen. Up next at number 9, I'm going with Satan and Earth Infernal. The new wave of British heavy metal legends, been around a super long time. We're on hiatus for a while, but they've got back together and put out a bunch of new albums in the new millennium. The new millennium, wow. How old? I'm just dating myself here, but nonetheless, yeah, these guys were around in the 80s, put out a really solid album, Court in the Act, put out another album or two, I believe, then kind of disbanded or just weren't being active. Then they put out a string of albums recently. They're all pretty solid. And this one, yeah, they don't sound old at all. I'm sure these guys are in their 60s. Just really great tunes, super catchy stuff. If you're into new wave of British heavy metal at all, strongly suggest going and check out this album. It's just really solid stuff. Great riffs, catchy choruses, exactly what you want in this style of music. That's why it's in at number 9. Up next at number 8, I don't know how to pronounce this, but I'll try. Bhleg, B-H-L-E-G, and their album Fäghring. This is some black folk metal. I believe these guys are from Sweden as well. This is very enjoyable, interesting album, bringing a lot of different folk instrumentation. I would say that it's not necessarily the most consistent album. There's a couple spots where maybe it meanders a little bit, but nonetheless, it is overall a pretty enjoyable, engaging album. So if you're into any sort of black or folk metal combination, go give this album a listen because it's definitely at least worth checking out. Up next at number 7, going with some Canadian content and Skullfist's brand new album, Paid in Full. So if you haven't heard these guys before, it's basically traditional metal mixed with speed metal. Just really solid riffs and solos. The vocals are pretty good. I think they're just a trio. All in all, like, I couldn't put this album higher than 7th because there are maybe a couple songs that are weaker than the rest that maybe hold this back from being as good as it can. But when this album hits, it really hits. There's some really solid stuff on here, like Long Live the Fist is an absolutely catchy song that's going to stick in your head for sure. Like I said, musicianship's really on point here. I don't have too much negative to say about this. Couple songs I would switch out for different ones maybe, but all in all, really solid album in at number 7. Up next at number 6, going with some death metal and Undeath with It's Time to Rise from the Grave. So this is like some pure Cannibal Corpse worship, but Cannibal Corpse worship. I don't know what I just said there. Corpse. Learn how to talk, man. But yeah, just really solid stuff. You can tell these guys aren't taking themselves too seriously. Just really having a fun time. This is just fun death metal. Maybe it's not anything too new. They're not necessarily bringing a lot new to the table, but even if it's not the most unique thing out there, it's just a fun album to listen to. Is it going to stand the test of time in 10 years down the road? I don't know about that. I don't necessarily think it's on that level of greatness, but if you're just looking for a solid slab of death metal, this is pretty solid. Really catchy songs on here, great riffs. Necrobionics, Head Splattered in 7 Ways. That's just a hilarious song title. All in all, really solid stuff. One of the better death metal albums for the month, for sure, in at number 6. So now we are into the top 5, my 5 favorite albums from April. So coming in at number 5, I'm going with a debut album, and this is a band called Fer de Lance with their album, The Hyperborean. So this is some epic heavy metal, doom metal, basically epic doom. Maybe similar comparison of bands would be, especially for newer bands, would be like Atlantean Codex or Crypt Sermon. If you're into either of those bands, you'll probably enjoy Fer de Lance. Just really like lengthy songs, soaring vocals, brings to mind like Viking era Bathory, which is always a good thing in my books. I absolutely love that. But mixing in just a lot of different elements. There's even a lot of nice little acoustic passages mixed in there with the like heavier pounding parts. It's just a really well executed album. I'm really enjoying this one. This might even climb higher up on this list as I listen to it more. But my favorite tracks so far are Ad Bestias. The title track is an epic closer to the album. All in all, if you're into epic doom at all, do yourself a favor and go check this album out because it is solid. Up next at number 4, I'm going with Evil Invaders and their new album Shattering Reflection. So I did a whole review on this album, so I won't talk too long about it, but yeah, this is basically speed metal mixed with like 80s metal, just like pure 80s revivalism, 80s metal worship, and they just execute it so well. Like on one hand, you'll have a really fast song like Sledgehammer Justice, and then you'll have a pure like 80s ballad like In Deepest Black, and they execute both so fucking well. This album is probably the album I've listened to the most this month. It did come out at the beginning of the month, so that's a reason why too, but I'm not getting tired of this album at all. It's really solid stuff. Die For Me is another really solid song on this album. This is another one where maybe there's 1 or 2 tracks that aren't quite on the level as the rest of the album, but all in all, as a whole, I really dig this a lot. I really love these guys, and this album deserves its high place on my list. Up next at number 3, another album that I did a full review of that you can go check out, and that is Marrasmieli with their album Martaiden mailta. Probably mispronouncing all of that. This is some epic black metal with some folk touches. These guys are from Finland. Similar bands would be like Moon Sorrow, Have a Krunu, just mixing all that kind of stuff in there. There's even reminisces, like it reminds me of coeur in parts as well with some of the folk instrumentation. It's really, really solid stuff. Epic songs. Ghosts of Future and Past. The Oaks of England is possibly my favorite on the album. All in all, yeah, go check out my review if you want a more in-depth analysis of this album, but really solid, enjoyable stuff in at number 3. Now, the next 2 albums, this was really tough for me. This was a toss-up for which one's in number 2 and which one's number 1. Really, it could go either way. That might even change in time. To me, these 2 albums are a step above all the rest for the month, but these 2 are so neck and neck that it's really hard to say. But for the sake of today, what I've got coming in at number 2 is some more Canadian content, this time some Canadian black metal with Incandescence and their album Le Coeur de L'Homme. So this band is very interesting for black metal. It features the drummer from technical death metal band Beyond Creation. He actually does drums, guitar, bass, like writes all the songs here. And so he's coming from that technical death metal background. He's really bringing like a technicality to black metal that usually isn't there. Like the drumming is very different for black metal, and even the riffs are so unique, but this album is just so awesome from front to back. I don't have any complaints about a single moment on this album. It's really solid. I almost put this at number 1. It's so close, but yeah, one's bound to pop up on my year-end list for sure. The vocals are great too. Really suits this so well. Absolutely awesome black metal album. So if you have not yet checked out Incandescence Le Coeur de L'Homme, do yourself a favor and go listen to it right goddamn now. And that just leaves one album to rule them all. My favorite album from April is another album that I did a full review of, and that is Vanum with their album Legend. So I won't go into too much detail. As I said, I did a full review of this album, but this is some like epic black metal, atmospheric black metal, whatever you want to call it. Another album that kind of pays homage to Viking era Bathory, but also bringing in a lot of other influences, kind of reminiscent of Druk in places as well. But it's just really triumphant sounding and just epic stuff, and I absolutely love this style of black metal. And that's why it's in at number 1. My favorite tracks on here are basically the whole album, but Adversary is a standout, Legend, Beneath the Pillars of Earth and Air is an absolute epic to close it off. So yeah, all in all, not an easy choice this month between my number 1 and number 2. Those are basically tied, so definitely go check out both of those albums, but also go check out this whole list if you haven't. So anyways, I know there's a lot of other albums that came out this month, some of which I've heard that just didn't make my list, and some that I just haven't got around to listening to yet. So if there's any you feel that I should definitely be listening to, please pop them down below. I love getting all your recommendations. I love to hear what you think about my list as well. So anyways, until next time, give me a like and give me a subscribe. Hammer Heart Metal Reviews. Ow!